Okay, so a little bit of materials in Revit. So let me do very fast a couple of spaces here. I'm going to do a couple of walls or exterior walls connected to level 2, rectangular. There you go. I'm going to go to level 2, create a very simple roof. I'm going to pick these guys. Oops. Say okay. It's one tool we haven't seen. This is what happens when you have a wall and then a roof on top. You can actually connect walls to roofs by selecting an attached top base, and you select the roof and it goes up there. That's a nice way to connect walls to roofs. I can do them by pressing tab, all of them attached top base here. So it goes boop, up there. I'm going to do a floor. There you go. And I'm going to do camera from inside. I'm going to place a couple of windows. I'm not going to spend much time in this, just having a basic idea. And one of these is going to be a curtain wall. So it brings a lot of light there. Okay, that curtain wall I'm going to select, and I'm going to make it a very fast fixed distance to create some mullions very fast without actually thinking too much. Okay, and let's go to the camera that it just created. And the first thing I recommend is that if you have a view that you think you can get more out of it, you should get something more out of it. So change the boundaries of your cropping region and start orbitating and moving your camera around. That's this tool here. You bring this out, and there's several things that you can do. You can orbit, and this works a little tricky in the beginning, but then it's quite useful. As you click the orbit, you orbitate. Okay, you can also pan, just moving right and left. You go up and down, that's your head is moving up and down. It's very valuable. You can zoom in and out. And you can also walk. Walking is pressing and moving like if it was a joystick in a way. You go upwards or something. You can walk around and rotate. You can center and you can look as if your head was rotating. Okay. You can rewind. This is if you want to go backwards in history in a way. So it's a quite useful thing. There's another option here in this little triangle. You can set the focal length. This is a little bit of camera openness. So it's real, if you want to, it's not zoom, it's more lenses of the camera. Okay. Anyway, so that's once you find your ideal view, and remember it's a 2234, so your best one should have a proportional kind of a window for that. No? You can always crop afterwards in InDesign, but it's good to have to keep a proportional relationship of whatever image you have in 10. Okay, and once you have this cropping view, the first thing is obviously rendering and see how this is looking. So you can turn on shadows and see if the shadows are the ones you want or you like. If you don't like them, go to sun settings and change them. Okay, I don't know, you can apply, you can start changing the time until you get the light that you like. No? That one is coming in. I mean, very strong lights tend to be very romantic in a way, but you have to be a little bit in between. So I'm thinking at 8:45 might look nice. Okay, so you get your light coming in nice, and then you can even change your look if you want to look a little bit different depending on the shadows. That's, I think, something that makes sense. There you go. Okay, and then I recommend you do your first rendering. You click on the teapot. This guy comes out. We have seen it in the past, and I will keep it simple. I wouldn't go to high or best. I would stay in even draft and then move it up, and then choose the basic options of the mentor array, which is again the default settings in Revit. So let's say sun only. That's going to give you less, very strong shadows. Sun and artificial. That's if you have lighting incorporated. Artificial only if it's, for example, in the night and you want only lighting, or there's no natural light at all. And then you have the option of exterior, interior. So choose very straightforward. What is it that you want? Normally, in this case, I'm going to do interior sun only. Okay. This is basically the sun setting, which we have set, and this is the sky. I mean, it's very straightforward. So a few clouds, many clouds. That's going to give you a different type of the sky. This is important. Adjust exposure, and I'm not touching it now. You can touch it afterwards, and you see how it works. Number one, you set this to draft, and you say rendering. Because I'm sharing this image, it's going to take a little bit too much time. But under draft as an option, you can do it almost immediately, so it shouldn't take a lot of time. What you do once the draft option is done is set the adjust exposure. So almost everybody, unless you have a lot of openings and a lot of light coming in, you're going to have this first draft image dark. Okay. In my case, it's a big window. Windows, it's a little bit the opposite, it's bright. But if it's dark, you need to go to adjust exposure after the rendering and change these options very little. Say darker, apply. Brighter, apply. So you start changing these little things, and this exposure value, this is the most important. It's basically how bright it is. Highlights is this is a highlight of intensity. So you might want to do those darker, for example. Shadows, the shadow areas, you can make them lighter or darker. Saturation is basically color. So if it's, towards the gray, there's absolutely, it's desaturated, no color. But if you go towards the intense, it's going to be saturated, strong colors. Okay. So normally it's just minimal changes make a big difference. I recommend you do that like very, very carefully. Depends on your project. This is more if you want cooler or colder type of environment, moving towards the blues or towards the yellow and reds, the other side of the spectrum. So maybe you want to stay in the middle, but maybe if you want to give a sense of warmth, then you might want to go towards the warmer colors, or a bit colder towards the colder. It's as simple as that. Once you set these guys with the draft option, you say, okay, then you go to the high or best. Very high is enough. And any render you do is going to be following that adjustment, okay? So once you're done with the highs, I'm not going to do it because it takes a little longer time. You can save to the project, so you will have it here in the views, or you can export it. And you can save it as a JPEG, PNG, or TIFF, or BMP, which basically JPEG is going to be a little compressed, PNG a little bit better quality. So that would be an image that you get. If you save to the project, you can give it a name, rendering 1, and it appears here under rendering 1. So you can drag it into a panel, or you can print it or export it or save it as whatever you want to do. Okay, so that's the basic setting. That's how you do a rendering. From the view, you create a camera, blah, 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 you rename the camera, maybe, et cetera, et cetera. Now the question is, how do we create our own materials? How do we change the material? So let's start with the very basics. Let's use the library of materials of Revit, which is not the standard one that appears. There's another one that is much more powerful. Let's say that this wall, I want it to be a particular material that is different. No? So how do we do that? Simple as going to your camera. You need to select the element you want to change. And you need to go to the edit of the layers. Now, as we talked many times, these are the layers that make up for the wall. And as you can see, exteriors up here and interiors there. So the gypsum wall board is this material that we see. That's the material that we see. And that's the material we need to change if we want to change the color or whatever it is. Now, if I start changing by clicking on the little box here, gypsum wall board material, takes a while. Again, clicking on that little 3-point box. If I change this material, I could potentially say change the appearance to another color, etc. But we don't want to change an existing material. That's not good to do. So I do not recommend that. I do not want you to assign a different material either here because you're changing a default wall. So the first thing always, duplicate. And we're going to call it new interior mat material. And here, now that we have changed it, now we have our own wall. Yes, we can go to the finish and say, I don't want this material, I want a different one. Okay, so you can create a new material. There you go. That's default new material. You can right click and rename it. And you can call it red paint, whatever it is. Okay, red paint has, this is a new material. This has no particular properties right now. The properties of that new material is going to be a very default white or gray type of thing. Nothing good, nothing bad. It's just the standard. You don't want that. Okay, we want to change that. So how does this work? This identity, this is just naming or information about that layer. We don't care too much about it. Graphics and appearance. This is a very important distinction. Graphics is the way we see this under hidden line. How do we see it under uniform color? So basically, how do we see it in the screen? It's very useful. The surface pattern, cut pattern, all these things is how do we see it in the interface of Revit? And appearance is the world of rendering. So we can change under a material, we can change both. How do we see it in the Revit interface? And how do we actually see it when rendered? Okay, we can change those independently or together, however you want it to be. What we care about now is appearance, but you need to think that graphics is actually very, very important as well. Okay, let's change it just for the sake of it to red. It updates here. I'm going to say okay. Now that material is red paint and it corresponds with the finish in the interior. We say okay, say okay. Now that wall is the one we say new interior material. So this other wall still is the old one. So if we render, only that wall would be red. Let's do it and see. I'm going to do a draft always, otherwise I'm here forever. Red, simple, there's no reflection or anything. And it's only that wall because I duplicated it. Okay. Next, if we go to that same wall, we can edit type. We can do edit. By the way, you can access the materials just also by going to manage. But anyway, I like to go here because I know that's the layer I'm changing red paint. What other things can we do with a new material? We can go to appearance again, and we can say, I want some reflectivity, and then how much or how little, something to test. Yeah, the render will update here, the preview. You can add transparency as well. If I add transparency, it wouldn't matter because that particular wall has many layers behind. It's not going to affect it in any way. You can create bump, that we'll talk about these things another time. So just by adding reflection, and I'm not sure that the degree of reflection I place, but that should actually start reflecting all around it. Okay, so notice how the walls here are expanding. That's part of the reflection. And if it was high resolution, obviously the sound will be smoother and nicer, no? Okay, so maybe it's too reflective. That's something to discuss. That's on you. Okay, so we have that wall. I could always select this other wall and say, I want you to also be the new one I created. That's assigned with the material. So it's very important that you do that. It's just to change, to duplicate, so you can assign different walls to different settings of materials. So now both walls will be reflective. There you go. And that's how you see the reflective windows there. Okay. That's one thing. Let's do the same in the roof. If I select the roof and edit type, again, duplicate is important. Let's say new interior material. They edit. There's only a structural layer here, so I'm going to insert one, call it finish, and I'm going to give it like, I don't know, 1 inch thickness. So that would be it. And then I can say, give me a material. In this particular case, I could use red paint as well, because you can put that material in any place. If I say okay there, and I render, there's going to be a funky world of red reflective thing. But I'm going to show you other options to use. Okay, that's red reflecting like crazy. That makes sense. Okay, but what if I want, is there a library there that we can use? Yes, there is. So if I go to the roof, the new material, and then go to the material, again, clicking that little button there. Let me create a new material. This is how we actually do, and it's very important. How do we select a material from a library that is quite extensive from Revit? Say, first, new material. Right click, rename, and call it whatever you want it to be. Let's say, I don't know. Let's say you wood new. Okay, once you create your new, again, the new one appearance will be default and basically no details, no color, no reflections or anything. But here is this button that opens and closes the set browser, opens a window, here it is, with thousands of materials, thousands. I recommend we start with the appearance library or the out of this physical assets. Those are good enough to start, and there are many of them inside. So let's say that the roof that I'm saying has a concrete, whatever. I mean, I can change that afterwards. Although we have wood probably somewhere, no, stucco. wood here. Okay, let's do wood, given that hardwood panels, softwood. Let's say cardboard, asp, or plywood new. Okay, so the way to take one of these materials that you have so many under the asset browser into the wood new, the new material that you have created is as simple as double clicking. So you're going to do double click here, and it goes, and the information is traveling to that new material. It's updating, and there it is. Then you can close this. You can say OK, and that would be wood new. Again, to emphasize that, you create a new material, you give it a name, and under the project, the asset browser, you select the material you want under the two first options, double click to bring in the information into that material. Okay, then you can say OK, and that will make the interior layer of that roof with that material that you created. So if we render this, that should be reflected now. There you go. Okay, you get the idea. And last, I'm going to do it again, and then I'll stop the video. For the floor, select the floor, you type. Again, I recommend that you always duplicate. You add interior. I mean, normally you will give a better name than this. Edit. Once you duplicate, you can change your thing. The top is the, this is a mosaic now, but I'm going to give it a new material from the library. I'm going to say new material. I'm going to right click, rename, and I don't know, let's just do stone floor material. There it is. I go open the asset browser, select the first or the second options, expanding, searching for stones. Stone, there are many options, granite, marble, I don't know, whatever it is, or stone. You can do any of these options. And again, most probably you can find more options here. Let me see if I can find stone. Here you have many of them. Green polish, gray, granite. So I'm going to use granite red. I'm going to double click here, and it brings the information into the new material. That's how you take it in. Okay. Okay, so all of the rendering there. Okay, that's now here. Okay, okay. And when we render it, we should have our granite floor. Again, this is very low res, it's difficult to see anything, but you get the idea of how you change materials from particular basic project elements. So the big question, and of course, floors, walls, and roofs are straightforward because you know there's a layer you have to create and give that layer a material, no? So the question is, what about a stair? What about a panel of a curtain wall? What about? So we need to find, this is as simple as finding the place where the material is assigned. Okay, so if you're in the, for example, in a panel, and pressing tab and selecting a panel, you need to find where the panels have their material. So maybe it's under edit type, and here is material glass. So this panel, which is a glaze system, I can change the materials here. Now you say, wait a minute, should I just change it here? No, because if you change this one, you're changing all of the panels. Unless you want to do that, I will recommend duplicate and say glass panel 2 or new, and now change the material of that panel. And I can do the same, new material, right click, rename, let's say glass panel green as a browser. And obviously there should be many materials about glass, no? So we look for glass. You have, you know, all these kind of glass. I'm saying green, I don't know why I say green, but maybe under appearance we can find a green glass. There you go. Clear green, double click, in, updating, see okay. There is, and again, only that panel would be green because the rest I haven't changed, I duplicated. So when I do rendering here, that panel should be green. You can obviously assign it to all of the panels if you want. There's not much of a difference, to be honest. So maybe, oh, there is a difference here, slight. So maybe it's very clear. So we can try other materials, other green glasses. This thicker here, something happens. So there is a change, but very minor. It's probably really transparent. But that's how basically you will be changing the materials of a panel. No? In the panel, assign a different material. The same goes for stairs. Where are the stairs material assigned? Same goes for windows. Where is the material assigned? So the question here is, where is the material parameter for the thing I want to change? And then assign a material. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording now.